Afternoon. The record will reflect the presence of counsel, the defendant, and the jury. Mr. Barker, you may proceed.
Thank you. Sev, before the break, we were talking about the area around Sunset Crater near the body. Can we go back to that slide again? Connecting up.
No, I think your settings jumped over to mirror another image, so let me adjust this. There we go. Is that a duplicate?
We were talking about the timing of the defendant's device, where it was. You'd mentioned before the break, before lunch, that it was traveling pretty consistently with how long it would take to make that kind of U-travel around Loop Road, right? Right. Until about, I don't remember the time, maybe we can go back to that point where there's a backtrack.
113.
113.
So it passes Sunset Crater. We see it out there at 103. And then it turns around and it comes back to the east, and we see it, the last time we see it is at 113 east of Sunset Crater, and then we're not going to see it again until 03:33, which is a 2-hour and 20-minute gap of time.
All right. And so you don't see the device popping up anywhere in that 2-hour, 20 minutes?
No, not at all. Well, with the data down below 200 meters, we see nothing that would show that it clearly has left this area.
Okay. So there's stagnant, well, I don't even know if you could say stagnant, but there's just not a location from Nelos at that point.
In this area.
In that area.
Travel back up to the north, didn't leave and head to Flagstaff. We don't see anything like that.
All right. How far away is the body where that pin is? Can you tell us?
So this last one, we would have to...
Are you going back to the KML files?
Yeah, I have to go back to the KML.
That's 169 for the record.
So there's that 1:13 a.m. Nelos hit right there. And so before the device disappears, we're looking at approximately about 2 kilometers. If I put that in miles, approximately 1.3 miles. And that's for the Nelos hit. Now for the device itself, the only way to get from up north to this location is to drive on Loop Road. It's the only route available. So the closest you could get the device at any given time would be about 88 meters as it passed this location on Loop Road.
All right. Now, we talked about before the break as well that this area, according to previous testimony, there's no cell coverage. Would that affect why we can't see those Nelos hits around that area?
It's going to contribute to that. We just kind of lose the good Nelos that we were seeing up to that point.
All right. Let's go back to the PowerPoint again and take us through that next slide.
So the next time we see it, just to barely to the west of Sunset Crater is at 33 minutes after 3 a.m. From there, the device will continue to travel to the west, and by 3:41 a.m. is back in the vicinity of Highway 89.
So what are we talking about time-wise? How much of a detour is this off the 89 from the moment that the defendant's cell phone left the 89 to the moment it returns?
Well, you're looking at an approximate drive time of 55 minutes to get around there, but that doesn't take into account the 2 hours and 20 minutes. So close to just over 3 hours of total time kind of in this area.
All right. Let's take it to the next slide now.
From here, the device is going to get back on Highway 89, and we'll see it take the normal route that we would expect to see for travel through the area, back through Flagstaff and south on I-17.
Okay, so basically taking that same route the device took when it headed north, just returning that same route.
That is correct. The only difference between the travel that was north when the device came up here, on the way back, we're going to get another one of the areas where this device goes stagnant for a while. So we're partially in between Flagstaff and Phoenix. It's close to the Orem exit area, just north of the exit that would take you to Prescott. And it's 4:57 a.m. now, and we're getting that kind of that grid look again right here. So the device is somewhere in this vicinity off of the I-17 or very close to the I-17, but then it's going to stop. And we are not going to see any activity. The last one we see is at 4:57. And then we don't see the device in this area again until 5:41. So we get a 44-minute break here where the device just isn't moving. So we got about a 44-minute period of stagnant activity, and the device just is somewhere in the area but not moving. And we don't get NELOS during that gap. The 200 meters or better.
So there's no NELOS in that during that stagnant activity?
Nothing under 200 meters. Nothing that would indicate movement out of the area. It's just, it stays in this general area.
Let me ask you about that. Could one reason be lack of cell service in the area?
No, on the way up and on the way back, we're getting hits in this area. It's just the device has stopped moving.
Okay.
Whatever reason. It's
just not moving. That's the stagnant activity you're talking about.
From here, we will continue to see movement starting at that time period, and the device will continue to move down and take the normal route we would expect to see as it returns to Luke Air Force Base. As we come in and look at the last NELOS we'll see before this device drives back onto the Air Force Base, is going to be at 6:49 a.m. And then in the Kachina gate is the gate that this device will drive through that gate to enter Luke Air Force Base. And in the records for the gate, you have a military ID that has to be scanned in order to access the Air Force Base, and that military ID is scanned. Has the defense name and the last four of Social Security number. And the time of that, we're getting both times here. It's both in UTC and in local. The local time that card was scanned is at 6:53. So last NELOS is westbound on Glendale Avenue at 6:49, and then scanning the card driving into the base at 6:53. So the times again for travel, speed, distance, time line up quite well.
When you say speed, distance, time calculation, how are you doing that type of calculation? How do you determine that's consistent?
Previously, how we did it before with dropping the pins, directions from here, directions to here. We can do it anywhere on the route and show what Google would estimate your time at based on that current time for driving. As long as there's nothing like a crazy accident going on, you'll get your average times. And then when do we see the NELOS hits? Like, how do we see this one? In this case, we're getting a NELOS hit. The next one is a hard time at the gate for the entry whenever the card was utilized to access the base. So we're seeing that travel time between 6:49 versus the gate, which is on the left-hand side with the yellow pins at right there, is at 6:53.
And that just shows, again, that no stagnant activity. It's consistent with someone driving along that route to the gate.
Consistent travel on Glendale at this time in the morning.
And you have a little clip there that the DBIS report that was referenced earlier, that's Exhibit 152 that we've had testimony about. So could you do me a favor, Sev, and tell us how long it took from Farmington, at the point the defendant's cell phone left the abduction site to the point of return. What are we talking about time-wise? And then contrast that with how long it would take a return trip typically.
So if we did like a Google Maps travel time to take into account the deviation to follow Loop Road around and not take the direct route on Highway 89, it would be approximately 7 hours and 34 minutes. The total time for return in this case, based off the NELOS, is 11 hours and 4 minutes. And the increased time is just due to that stagnant activity that we get around the Sunset Crater. It's just a substantial amount of time added significantly to this trip's return time. Additionally, there's slower than normal activity driving from New Mexico across into Arizona. It takes approximately 20 minutes longer than normal to drive through the northern part of the Navajo Nation, the reservation there. And there's nothing significant as far as a potential stop, not to say there wasn't one, but the NELOS does get spots in there where we don't get any. But clearly we get over 2 hours of that stagnant activity down in the location of where the body will be recovered.
All right. Now, on the timeline here, we see some other dates if we're going down. We've heard testimony about the defendant leaving the Air Force Base on the 21st. Do you have, did you map that as well?
We did.
Let's talk about that.
So again, to orient, in here, we're going to start in this, in Arizona. We'll kind of come down into the Phoenix area, go over to the west side, outside of Peoria and Glendale to the Air Force Base. And very similar to what we looked at from a few days prior to this, the last time we see the device clearly closer to the barracks over here where the defendant lives is at 1743. And then clear movement to depart the Air Force Base by 7:03 p.m. And Kachina Gate, the device is right there. The Kachina Gate is getting ready to drive out the gate. And we're going to see activity, again, driving to the north, headed towards Flagstaff. So departing the area approximately 7:03 p.m. on the 21st. There will be no stops on this one. The device is going to do, nothing that stood out for stagnant activity, but directly to the north. Passing Flagstaff, continuing north on Highway 89, going to the southern section of Loop Road, where Loop Road connects to 89, so directly west of Sunset Crater. By the time the device gets up there, it's 9:34 p.m., and we see that activity of the device turning off the interstate eastbound, going towards Sunset Crater. And we're getting our little grid lines in there again. And once again, we can just get right to maybe a hair past to barely to the eastern side of Sunset Crater. And we're going to lose that NELOS again. So it drops off. It's the last time we see it in this area is at 2140. And the next time we'll catch it on the way back out of this area, heading back towards Highway 89. Will be right there. And the time is 22:05. So we get about a 25-minute gap. 2140 to 22:05. Again, the device is somewhere in the area, but we have no additional location data other than 2140, and then we see it again just to the west of Sunset Crater at 22:05, at 10:05 p.m.
Let me ask you about that speed distance calculation again. Let's say a car is driving on that road at typical speeds. Is this consistent with that, or is there any time unaccounted for?
There's 25 minutes unaccounted for. The travel time from the highway just up to the crater is consistent with normal time. From here back to the highway will be consistent with normal time, but we get a 25-minute window where there's just no activity. The device is there somewhere to the east of Sunset Crater, and we simply don't see it.
All right. And then what does the device do after that?
Once we see this 2205 hit, the device is again driving out of the area east of Sunset Crater, and it will return to Luke Air Force Base. We'll see it drive towards Highway 89. So getting ready to turn onto Highway 89 by 10:09 p.m. And then once it makes that turn onto Highway 89, it'll see a return trip to the south, taking us back towards Luke Air Force Base.
And again, any detours or any stagnant activity on this way back?
Nothing that really came out at all. It seems like a normal drive time, normal route. The last Nilos hit we will see is pushing down there to head west on Glendale Avenue. The only difference between this return trip and the one from the morning of the 19th is a different gate will be utilized. Majority of these military bases have more than one gate. So previously we saw the Kachina gate. This time we will get a different gate. It's considered the main gate or the south gate to Luke Air Force Base. So the last Nilos hit we see is 30 minutes after midnight on the morning of the 22nd. The device is right here. That north gate is down here just to the south, south gate, just to the south of the Air Force Base. And on the time that the card is scanned into the system to make entry onto the base is 39 minutes after midnight. So we see it on Glendale Avenue, 30 minutes after midnight, and driving back into the Air Force Base as a corroborating evidence for the accuracy of the records at 39 minutes after midnight on the 22nd.
So in summary, there's a route taken direct to the area of Sunset Crater where the device was 2 days before. There's an unaccounted for time in that around the Sunset Crater, about 25 minutes. Is that right?
Correct.
And then direct route back.
That is correct.
And showing up at the base after midnight.
That is correct.
Okay. Did you notice in your review of the records any return trips after that to the Sunset Crater area?
Not with the amount of data I had for the time frame I had, no. It's just those two.
All right. Now, on that timeline again, if we could skip to this next section, referencing some days prior. So this would be about a week, a little less than a week before Sasha's disappearance, right?
Correct.
Tell us what the data shows with regard to the defendant's device.
So very similar data. We're going to see this Nilos, again, is taking advantage of GPS being utilized by the device, but we're not going to leave the Phoenix area. So zoom into the Phoenix area. Head over to the western side once again, close to Luke Air Force Base. And we're going to see that the phone is located here on the main part of base around 9:05 a.m. on the 12th of January, and is exiting out of in vicinity of the south gate by 9:08. So driving off of the base and is going to head in the eastern direction, more into towards the Phoenix area of Arizona. We're getting our lines there again. Once we get into this vicinity here, what we're going to see is we're in close proximity to the Trinity Mennonite Church. It's 9:31 a.m. This would be a Sunday morning at 9:31 a.m. when church services would be in session, and we're going to see some stagnant activity. So the first time we see the device in this vicinity is at 9:31. And all that activity is piling up on top of each other again. And the last time we will see it in this area before it departs is at 9:43. So we get that gap from 9:31 to 9:43, just a little over 10 minutes, where the device isn't moving. And it's in a close proximity to the Trinidad Mennonite church on a Sunday morning.
Is it Trinity? Not Trinidad, right?
Trinity.
Okay,
Trinity
thank you.
Mennonite church.
And is there communication from that actual device as well happening during that time?
Not necessarily during this one, no.
When does that occur?
From here, the device is going to travel into a different part of Phoenix. And again, we're going to see that stagnant activity. And it's going to look somewhat similar to what we saw in the neighborhood where the abduction occurred in Farmington, where it's going to be more than one area. We're going to be hitting points of those grids. The first one that we see in this area is going to be at 9:54, and the Sunny Slope Mennonite Church is in this general area. And when we bring in the rest of the stagnant activity, those are the three locations that we're hitting. So we're kind of getting very similar kind of look to what we had in the neighborhood in eastern Farmington, where we get stagnant activity here, here, and down here. So there's our grid. So the device is somewhere in this area, and in this area again on a Sunday morning, from 9:54 to 10:12 a.m. on the 12th. So we're getting about 18 minutes of stagnant activity during a time frame when church services are in service at Sunny Slope Mennonite Church. During this set of stagnant activity, we are going to see some communications. So now we're getting away from the NELOS hits, because now we're talking about an actual communication, a phone call, text message, data connections. In this case, it's a text message, and it's outgoing from 3215 and going to a outgoing text message to another device ending in 2044. And it's simply asking a question, WYD today. Assuming that's abbreviation for like, what are you doing today?
Now we've heard testimony again that number, the 2044 number, belonged to Samuel Gooch. Was this one of the frequent contacts of this device?
Yes, it's like the number 3 most contacted device in these set of records. So yes, very consistent contact quite often with both voice calls and text messages.
All right. What other communication was there during that time?
So by 9:59 and 52 seconds, we get incoming from that same device saying, making some breakfast, might do some cleaning, bored as fuck.
All right, so that's incoming to the device, the defendant's device, right?
That is correct. It's coming from 2044 back to and responding to that question to 3215.
All right, and is there a response?
The outgoing response back to that device is, saying for some reason, even this morning's surveillance was boring. And by 10:01:18, reply, it's still in the same direction. So this is not a reply from 2044, it's another outgoing message. And it says, bunch of old people living without much to live for.
Actually, it's a bunch of old people without much
left to live for, excuse me.
Yeah, it's all right.
And then by 10:02, it's another outgoing connection. So these are continuous outgoing messages from 3215 to this other device, 2044, and says clearly, not the Mennonite people we grew up with. Sad to say, another disappointment.
All right. Is there continual conversation?
There is. So now this is incoming. So we had 3 outgoing in a row. Now the other device will respond and say, I wish I was out by you. We'd find something to do or some shit to get into. At 10:03, a response. Exactly, but now it's sad. Doing anything by myself and taking risks is back at 0. 10:05, incoming, so response from 2044. I thought about getting drunk all day, but even that isn't very fun because I feel like shit afterwards. It really is true that after a while you care more about your health and how you feel. And then outgoing, so a reply from 3215. Yep, it's all about survival and yourself after a while. Same cell site, same sector, so the device is in the area, it's not moving. Outgoing, again, another outgoing message. I keep thinking I'd be nice to come see y'all. It'd be nice to come see y'all some weekend, but when I remember it's cold AF and won't be nice around there to mid-June. And then 1010, still in the same area. Even then, it'll probably be muddy and wet still. And another outgoing, well, I'm gonna head back to base and I'll be online in about 30. And that brings us up to 1012. Incoming from 2044, simply responding with okay.
So that's the conversation that was occurring while that stagnant activity was happening in that Sunny Slope church area?
It falls within that time frame when we see the Nilos in that area, but it's stagnant. So it's somewhere in that general area, not leaving that immediate area, and continuous text messages back and forth between these two devices.
In the context of that last text message about returning back to base, did that coincide with movement?
The movement did return back to the Luke Air Force Base immediately after this.
And what do we see after that?
Very quickly after that last text message, we're going to see the Nilos return back on a different route, kind of move up to the north, head back over to the west. Again, driving through the south gate, not using the Kachina gate. We get a Nilos hit there at 10:46, and on the gate entry time, it is at, with the ID card, it is at 10:48. So gate entry time and Nilos within a couple of minutes are in the same location.
So this was, again, January 12 during the daytime hours. And it was 6 days later that this same device travels to Farmington, right?
The morning of the 18th, that is correct.
Morning of the 18th, stays in Farmington for 3.5 hours or so.
Three, yes.
In the area around the abduction site.
Correct.
Sustain as to leading.
And then how long was it in the abduction site?
By the Nilos data, 3 hours and 31 minutes.
All right, and then we talked about just this afternoon about the return trip and how long it was in the Sunset Crater. And then it was 2 days later that the same device returned to the Sunset Crater.
That is correct.
Sustained as to leading.
When was it that the device returned to Sunset Crater?
It departed on the evening of the 21st, arrived at the Sunset Crater, and returns back to Luke Air Force Base on the morning of the 22nd.
We've been talking about how some of the Nilos, it isn't like GPS. In other words, it won't give you an exact location. You can't put someone in a room. Is that fair?
That is very fair.
Is there some type of capability on a phone that would put someone inside of a room?
If you did have any type of a report, location data coming off of a phone that was directly pulling from GPS with 1, 2, 3 meter accuracy, absolutely.
What about Google location data?
Google location data could absolutely do that. You could have that in your location report.
Have you reviewed Google location data before?
Many, many times.
How about a Google deletion record?
Once in a while, I will see a set of Google deletion reports where it shows on a specific date and time that
Objectives to foundation outside the scope of this is expert.
I'm laying foundation right now.
So overrule the objection, because my understanding is some more foundations coming.
That's right.
So I regularly review Google because it has geolocation data, and it's directly tied to your cell phone. Your cell phone actively collects location data, regardless as if you're an Android user or an iPhone user. You can have an Apple product. If you check routinely your Gmail address on that iPhone, if you're using Google Maps, many of the Google products out there, it is absolutely plausible that your iPhone could also send location data to Google. And it is assigned to and tracked by what we refer to as your identifiers. Your phone has a number in it called an IMEI, and it stands for International Mobile Equipment Identifier. And a lot of people, that's kind of a foreign thing. Like, what is this IMEI? Many people understand if you say your car has a VIN number. Most people know what that is. If you run a VIN number, as an example, in Carfax, it will tell you about that vehicle, the make, the model, what year was it made, what color was it. It's information about the vehicle. It's called a VIN number. The IMEI is like a VIN number for your phone. It's unique. Only your phone has this IMEI. And it tells you about the phone, the make, the model, what year it was manufactured, very similar to a vehicle. Google, if you're a Google customer and you have a Gmail address, Google tracks your IMEI. The IMEI will, in many cases, send location data to Google to track your patterns of life. That's how Google, as a business, makes their money. You are the business, your pattern of life for advertising purposes.
To the foundation, relevance.
Well, I'm laying foundation for this Google deletion record.
So they track your location data. Now, Google does give you the ability to go in and delete this location data under your settings. But if you do that, it will also, in some cases, generate a deletion report. This report will tell you on what day did you go into your settings and delete location data and for how much time. You don't have to delete everything. You could delete a day's worth, a week's worth, a month, the entire duration of your Gmail account. You can go in there and manipulate that. And on occasions, I absolutely do see deletion reports for Google accounts because they're directly tied to cell phones. And in many, many cases, they attempt to get Google location data.
And that's, as you mentioned, that deletion report would be associated with a particular Gmail account. Is that right?
And tied specifically to this device, 3215, yes.
All right. Judge, permission to publish 81, which has been admitted. I'm going to plug you, Sev, 1 second. All right, this is previously admitted as Exhibit 81. All right. Sev, can you, let me zoom in that a little bit more. Sorry about that. Too much. Can you see that okay?
No, I can't.
Okay.
The one zoom in, you
One more?
if you don't mind, I can get closer, either one.
Okay, that's not working. Let me try it a different way. All right, can you see that any better?
That's better, yes.
Okay, so you were just talking about how there's a record that shows when the request for a deletion was made, and then a deletion start and end time, correct?
That is correct. In a set of Google location records that were received from Google with a search warrant, you get two different files. One is the location history, and the other one is referred to as Tombstone. And if you make a deletion, it won't be, the deletion report isn't in your location Excel. They move it to the Tombstone report. That's where you can find these if one exists. And they do reverse order. So the oldest set of records, in this case, would be row 12. And then they move into the future as we go higher. So instead of going oldest to newest, they go newest to oldest. So
Okay.
row 12, it was a deletion was done for this particular Gmail on the 19th of January at UTC time at 14:29 and 11 seconds.
Let me just make sure we understand. So this Gmail account is listed up here as mgooch6666@gmail.com. So the deletion request, as you mentioned, is this first column, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so where that cursor is. So that's 7:29:11 p.m. if I'm doing the math right,
It would,
Arizona time.
yes, the deletion time local would be 7 hours to the second prior to that time. So 7:29 a.m. on the 19th.
And the requested deletion range, we see the start time is at that middle row, or excuse me, middle column.
Correct. Column B is a deletion was executed, deleting location data from 7 a.m. UTC on the 19th through 14 to that current time on the 19th UTC. If we do the math, that's deleting location data from midnight on the 19th of January through the current local time of 7:29 on the 19th.
All right. In other words, when that request was made, it was just a deletion from midnight to the time of the deletion request, right?
That is correct.
All right, let's go. So again, you said this is kind of reverse chronology. So as we go up, it's going to get, we're going to go sequential here, right? So what's the next request?
Still within that same minute of 7:29 a.m., but instead of 11 seconds, it's 18 seconds after. So we're seeing another request done, but instead of starting the deletion at midnight local time, they're backing it up even further back. So going back to 11, let's see, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, about 5 p.m.
Yeah, that's 7 hours from midnight.
7 hours back from midnight UTC time. So they just increased the amount of time being deleted.
So that's 5 p.m., but on the previous day of January 18, correct?
That would be correct, because we're looking at exactly midnight on the 19th, so we'd have to back it up 7 hours.
All right, and then it's basically a request to delete from 5 p.m. on the January 18, 2020 to the present time of the deletion request, which was the morning of January 19, right?
That is correct.
All right, let's go up to the row 10. What's the request there?
So we are now a few minutes later, so now we're at 7:31 a.m. and another deletion report, and the time just keeps increasing. So now the amount of time is getting deleted all the way back to 7 a.m. on the 18th, which would be, local time would be midnight on the 18th, all the way through, in this case, midnight on the 19th. So it says 07 a.m. 19, which would be midnight on the 19th.
All right,
So midnight through midnight, 18th through the 19th, a 24-hour period.
so just increasing that range a bit.
Well, backing it up even more, because this time it doesn't go all the way out to the current time. So there's a manipulation of dates and times, not just for the entry column, but for both columns.
Right, thank you. Row 9, what does that tell us?
So we're another minute and a half or so later, and now the deletion report is going all the way back to the 1st of January at midnight, which would be about 5 p.m. The last day of December, and going through until the 19th of January. So now we're talking a couple of months worth of deleted location, or going back to the beginning of the month.
Well, actually, look at the year.
Oh, excuse me, 1970. So going back to delete the entire account, like This count most likely did not exist in 1970, just putting in as far back of a date as possible. Max deletion, as much location data that could have ever been collected from Google for this particular account.
Okay. Going up one row to row 8.
Seconds later, same time period, so 32, but some seconds later. Repeat of that, so another deletion attempt some seconds later without manipulating those dates, keeping them the same.
And that's, again, just all data,
All
location
location data from January of 1970 all the way through the 19th of January 2020.
Let's go to row 7.
So on this one, we're still on the morning of the 19th. Now we're at 7:34 and doing a deletion from January 12th, 07, which would be midnight local of 2020, through January 19th, 7:34. So kind of hitting that local time again, but doing a deletion to go back to include all of the 12th as well, specifically.
So all these requests so far we've talked about all occurred within minutes of each other at around 7:30 a.m. on the 19th of January 2020, right?
From 7:29 through 7:34, multiple deletion attempts.
All right. Going up one row to row 6, what does that say?
So now we're on the 22nd. So we've jumped forward a few days. The deletion time is 08:07. So that would be shortly after midnight. We're talking, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, just after 1 o'clock in the morning. And the deletion is specifically from midnight on the 22nd, which would be 5 p.m. on the 21st, through the current time. So deleting back from late in the afternoon on the 21st all the way up to that current time early in the morning on the 22nd.
All right. And then the same, going up to row 5, the same date, almost the same time, another request.
Seconds later. And the times are, the initial time to start the deletion is duplicated. So again, midnight midnight UTC time on the 21st, ending this one specifically at midnight on the 22nd. So a manipulation of the times for both of them for a 24-hour period.
All right, let's go to row 4.
So this one would have been duplicated. This is another deletion attempt, but we're moving a few days into the future. Now we're on the 24th at 04:28 UTC time, and the deletion period that is trying to be deleted here is starting on midnight UTC on the 23rd of February, going up through February 24th. So a 24-hour period from 5 p.m. to 5 p.m., 23rd to the 24th.
All right, and then the final row there is row 3.
And this would be just a couple of minutes later, same date. And the deletion attempt is just backing it up from the 22nd to the 23rd. So this deleted 24 hours, and then this one's a deletion of the 24 hours before this one.
All right. So one could continue to delete their location history into perpetuity, right?
Absolutely.
Deleting, but it would just only delete the past. In other words, it could only delete a certain period of time that occurred on the phone in the past. So if you wanted to keep deleting your location history, you'd have to do it every day, or
If
Sustained.
what would you have to do to continue to delete your history?
you would have to continue to go in and delete records. So as a new day occurs, because they have an end date, so the deletion report only goes to a certain period of when the deletion range will end. If location data is collected for that Gmail after that date, it could be collected and stored, which would, if you wanted to delete that, would require another deletion. You can go back.
Right. I guess the better question would be, can you delete into the future? Delete future locations, in other words.
You can keep it from getting collected, but you can't delete into the future.
All right. All right, those are all the questions I have, Seth.
Good afternoon, sir. A few questions for you as well. I want to go back and just go big picture for a minute if we can. You're here primarily to tell us about location. Is that right?
Mostly, yes.
You're not here to, well, within location, you've used the words breadcrumbs, in other words, a route that somebody took. Is that a fair way to phrase it?
That is correct.
You've talked about some descriptors such as general vicinity.
Correct.
Use those words.
Correct.
Sometimes you talk more precisely about vicinity. How is it that you can do that?
It depends on the NELOS and what corroborating evidence we are adding to it.
All right.
Sorry.
Does general vicinity to you have any quantification? In other words, can you put a distance on when you use general vicinity?
Depending on which circumstance we're talking about, in some cases, yes.
Your purpose is location. Your purpose is not to describe what happened at a location. Correct, sir?
That is correct. Short of stagnant activity, but generally you are correct.
Understood. So within that understanding. So you're not here to comment on any specific activity that could have occurred at any general vicinity. Is that correct?
And that is correct. If McDonald's says you bought food at McDonald's, but I mean, that's super general. So yes.
Use that as an example. If you have some NELOS data that talks about being stagnant in that area, and even if you have a receipt that shows you bought a burger there, you can't tell us whether somebody consumed it. Is that fair?
That is 100% correct.
Same thing with gas. You might have been at a gas station. We got NELOS. We got a receipt. Doesn't mean you pumped the gas. You don't know.
Correct.
Right. So I want to talk about at the activity, at the location that you've described in Farmington, you sort of triangulated an area. You recall that, sir?
I do.
All right. So within that, I think you used the words general vicinity.
I did.
All right. Tell the jury why you used that term instead of something more specific.
Because of that grid nature that you can get your NELOS data in, that is not a 3-meter GPS hit. I can say confidently it's in the neighborhood, but I'm getting 3 of those points of that grid. So the best I can do is you're in that neighborhood for a duration of time because those hits keep repeating. But if you ask me specifically in that neighborhood, where are you? The data is not good enough to do that.
And you say that the data is good enough to put him on what you understand to be the Mennonite compound grounds.
I don't know what the compound area is at there.
Can you say more specifically, given that what you just told me, you cannot say more specifically that he was ever at the Mennonite church area?
So, what's being identified as the abduction site?
Yes.
I cannot place him like physically on the property where the church is located.
Can you say he was within a half a mile?
I would have to measure it, but I think I could confidently say within half a mile.
All right. Now, sometimes we see in some of the data that's associated, on the NELOS stuff of being within 25 meters. You recall that?
Correct.
Can you tell us why you tell me now you could be within a half a mile, but there's this thing that says it's within 25 meters? Can you compare that for us?
Yeah. So that is just a number that's attributed to it from AT&T. AT&T is saying within 25 meters. I've never testified on anything saying that you were for sure inside that circle. The way they stagnate in an area, the relevance of 25, 50 meters is that the device has to be collecting GPS in order to get those numbers that low.
All right. Now, I want to take us from what you've just described at the Farmington location, and I want to go to the area that you've described where the body was located. All right. Now, can you tell us with any greater precision how you describe how close, if at all, Mr. Gooch's device was to the location of the body?
So in 2 regards, the only way to continue by that route past that location, you have to travel on Loop Road, and I measured the distance from where the body was found to Loop Road, and that was the 88 meters. But as far as the NELOS, the closest NELOS is those hits that we get back towards Sunset Crater, just to the east of Sunset Crater. But we're looking, I believe I measured it at 1.3 miles, I believe.
3 miles.
1.3.
1.3, I agree, that's what you said. And is that as the crow flies, or as you travel?
Oh, that's straight line distance from that particular NELOS to where the body was located.
All right. And You mentioned that that was the last point. You had a point earlier than that. Did you measure the western point before you talked about doubling back? Did you measure that point?
I did not, but I could.
Would you agree that it's probably at least double, if not more than that?
It can conceivably be. It was definitely to the west of Sunset Crater before doubling back.
Now, that was the measurement that was recorded on the 18th, 19th time period. Is that correct, of January?
Correct.
Right. Now, you also tracked and took us through the breadcrumbs on the 21st, correct, sir?
Correct.
Now, same question. Can you tell us how close can you put any quantification on how close Mr. Gooch's device could have been on that location to where the body was found?
So on the way into that area by Sunset Crater, that last hit was about 9:40 p.m. And that one was just to that northeast corner of Sunset Crater. And I would have to look, but we're easily 1.3 to 1.5. I could double check if you'd like me to, but it's in that vicinity, very close to, similar to where that last one, the previous one, I was at 8.
That was my point, sir. So it is very close or similar to what you measured days before?
It will be. The patterns are very similar.
I want to talk about the trip where there is the text message about surveillance. You've described it as trips in the vicinity of some churches. You recall that on or about the 12th of January?
Correct.
All right. So can you tell us again, trying to quantify things more specifically, as to the Trinity Church, what's the closest that you can estimate Mr. Gooch's device to that church?
I could measure it for you and give you a closer example, but that one's probably close to a quarter mile, 400 meters. I would have to double check though to give you a proper answer.
Based upon the overview by Google, aren't there a number of buildings and things that surround that church area?
There are.
Same question regarding the Sunny Slope Church. Can you ballpark for us, based upon what you've determined, the proximity he had at that point?
That one's slightly different because we're getting in those 3 different stagnant locations, so it kind of directs you into a specific area, but again, within half a mile.
Again, as to any of those things, you cannot describe what activity was occurring.
Other than text message content back and forth, no.
Understood. Were you aware at the time that you got involved in this case whether Mr. Gooch engaged in any interview with law enforcement?
No.
Do you know, sitting here today, whether or not he engaged in an interview with law enforcement?
I'm not aware of any details about an interview.
So nothing that you did took into consideration, if Mr. Gooch spoke to law enforcement, what he told them about what he did and where he went?
No. As far as I know, I'm the first one to find that particular device in those cell site dumps. I believe I'm the one that discovered that and brought it up to the attention of law enforcement.
Mr. Gooch said that he went to New Mexico, went to the church area there. That would be news to you.
I just was going off the location data.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Sev, when did you tell law enforcement about, hey, here's a device that's in this area and it's at the abduction site and near the murder site?
So I advised law enforcement about the possibility that a cell site dump could help in this case because the distances are so far apart. If you did a cell site dump on 2 crime scenes that were only within a mile or 2 of each other, you've seen now how big some of those H-planes could be. How many common devices would we have within 2 miles? Hundreds to thousands. But this situation, our locations, Farmington, Four Corners, Flagstaff, Arizona, are so far apart that they can be effective. So I advised law enforcement that you should do these cell site dumps and get this area, and for all providers. And that's what was done. When I got those results back from their search warrants, directly in AT&T specifically, it only led to the single device to be in those 3 areas.
And when do you recall having that conversation?
I honestly I'd have to go back and look at my emails. I have no idea. I could tell you when I received those records to the day, but I would have to go look at my emails.
That's okay. You mentioned that there was only one unique device that was at the abduction site, at the Four Corners area, and at the body site among all providers. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, not just AT&T, but Verizon, T-Mobile, anything.
Sprint as well.
Exceeding and beyond the scope.
Sustained.
Council asked you to ballpark some stuff. I'm not going to ask you to do that. Can we go up to your diagrams again? Let's do the KML files. I'm going to ask you to measure some stuff.
Okay.
You were asked a question about Sunset Crater area, if we can jump to that. And the closest we see that device from the body, you could draw a line there and tell us what that is.
So just for reference, this would be 1:13 a.m. on the 19th. So the device traveled past Sunset Crater, turned around. This is that kind of that return trip before it disappears for a while at 1:13. And in a straight line, that distance, and I'll put it in miles, so you'll have to excuse me, I'm a kilometer kind of guy, so I gotta make sure I change this for you guys. We're looking at approximately 1.37 miles.
All right. Now that Nilos hit is in the middle of nowhere. Is that fair? It's not on a road, in other words.
It's being triggered from GPS or data because it's a tight radius somewhere back on, excuse me, Fire Road 545, I believe is the other term for Loop Road. It's right there.
That's the one. Yep.
Right. So that device is somewhere back over here. We're just getting that grid result. So somewhere arguably on Loop Road
All right. And
area.
now measure the body from a road access point.
On Loop Road?
The closest road, whichever one.
So the only way to get where that device was here further north, down to that location, you have to drive on Loop Road. There is no other way to do it. And you're looking at approximately, for it to pass by that area, and again, let me put it in feet this time. Approximately 276 feet.
All right. Now, just because you have a Nilos hit about a mile away doesn't mean that's the only place it went or that device went, right?
The device was on its return trip back to the east, and we lose it right here. And that pattern stays the same. For both trips, it's a consistent pattern. And when it comes back here and we lose sight of it, it continues to the east. Now, how far back to the east and where in this area, I can't tell you. But it's definitely east of this location because consistently that's what happens again. Everything comes back to patterns. What does normal look like? And then what does it look like when it's not normal? So this is past this area, but exactly where in there, couldn't tell you.
So, in other words, the device, it could have been right at the body site.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. It may not have been, you can't say.
That is correct.
But we've heard testimony that there is no cell phone coverage at the body site. Does that have
That's
an
also
effect?
correct. That's going to have an effect, yes.
So if Detective Nagel said she was at the body site after the discovery of it, didn't have cell phone coverage, you wouldn't see if she had AT&T Nilos hits from her phone.
I would not expect to see that. The only way that could change is if you went to an area with no AT&T cell coverage, but your phone was able to roam on another network, because the backbone of the network is AT&T. We do see Nilos across the reservation, even though there's no AT&T cell sites, because Cellular One's there. And your phones will roam, a Verizon phone will roam, once you get in the middle of that reservation. And that explains why we can see it there, but there's no AT&T here. There's nothing else. The phone's not roaming, and we simply do not have Nilos.
No, we're referring to Exhibit 169, which is the KML files. Just want to make sure the record's clear on that. Let's go to the 12th. So the January 12th, the surveillance stuff we were talking about earlier. If you could go to that map. And specifically, let's go to the Sunny Slope area. You were showing us earlier 3 stagnant areas around the Sunny Slope Church. Can you point those out?
So those are the 3 points we're getting. It's kind of starting to give you the grid there. They're vertically separated and horizontally separated, so 1, 2, 3, which would, and during the duration of the time that it's here, over 10 minutes, those hits do bounce around. But because it kind of gives us that grid box, the device is somewhere in this area.
All right. And now, counsel asked you how far away the closest NELO's hit was from the church. Give us now a more exact measurement, please.
So in miles, this one clearly up on the middle of a mountain, but 0.37 miles. 0.34 miles. And 0.56. So well within a half a mile to the north here. These ones would suggest a little less.
Right. And this was the church where there was that conversation about surveillance, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's go to the Lamp and Light area, the Farmington church. And show us those 3 stagnant clusters there.
So these are the 3 locations. It looks somewhat similar to what we saw around Sunny Slope. We have 1, 2, and then there's a smaller third one down here. A little bit bigger radiuses. They're not staying consistently within the 25 meters on this one. Abduction site is by this church located where the yellow push pin is at.
All right, give us a measurement now from the closest NELO's to the abduction site.
We're looking at about 1/10 of a mile. 0.48, so just under a half a mile. And then the location down to the south, our grid is 0.6364, so just a little over half a mile.
Thank you. You have a moment, Judge? All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Barker. All right, do any of the jurors have a question for this witness before he's excused? All right, apparently we do. No, I asked you. So would you join me sidebar, please? Okay. Were there any searches for Snowball on Mark's device?
Snowball?
Snowball, one word.
They said snowball. I was like,
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's my problem if I didn't make it clear.
a snowball as in the ski resort? I'm assuming?
Well, again, I can't, hold on, here's the situation, sorry, let me just, I can't give you further, these are the jurors' questions, but what can happen is this, is the attorneys get to do follow-up, as does, and then we'll see if there's any more questions from the jury before they do follow-up, so I think if you're on, that's the best I can say right now.
Good, you're good, John. Not that I personally saw, no.
Were there any times Mark's phone was stagnant in Flagstaff on January 18th, 2020?
Nothing that I saw that would have been significant enough to easily detect. Not that I saw, no.
Were there any other devices that pinged off the cell towers near Sunset Crater close to the time Mark was there?
So for the cell site dump that was done in the Flagstaff area, that would include Sunset Crater and all of northern Flagstaff. So absolutely yes. There were multiple phones, hundreds in fact, but that would include all of northern and a good chunk of Flagstaff.
Can you please repeat what the acronym is for NALOS? NALOS, sorry.
Sure. So the letters are NELOS. The N stands for network. E stands for event. The LO are location, so they use two letters for the same word, so LO is location, and the S is system. So NELOS is network event location system.
What is the typical approximate, let me back up. What is the typical / approximate distance between cell towers in general?
So there isn't really an answer for that. You can get into an area, Manhattan, Miami, downtown LA, heavy urban areas, and they can be within a few hundred meters of each other. A couple of football fields within proximity, at the end of the block, that close. You can get areas of Montana where they're over 100 miles apart. It completely is dependent on the environment.
Again, I'm just reading these questions as they're written out. So, sorry to ask you to repeat if the cell phone data for the victim was last registered from the victim's cell phone.
So the last time, the best I can answer that question, the last time we see that, the victim's cell phone, it's connected to a cell site located in southwestern Colorado, all just right almost in the Four Corners area. The azimuth that it connects to is facing towards the south. So it's covering 30 miles away. It can cover all the way down to the highway. I mean, it's covering a big area out there. And it is that cell site and sector in the records, that's the last time we ever see that device. I hope that answers that question.
Did you receive confirmation that the victim's cell was not picked up from the towers in Arizona?
I would say yes. And the reason I would say yes is because the search warrant for the victim's records went well past the time frame and that it could have been in flag, days past in fact, and we never see that device again. So according to the records that I have, the last time we see it, it's that southwestern Colorado cell site that's oriented towards the south, covering like the Four Corners area, along that area of stretch of road between Arizona and New Mexico.
How far does a single tower cover distance of radio wave?
That is actually a great question. And again, our environments, think of the environments in the United States. They're radically different. During the early part of 2020, March through June, when everything was really shut down, I trained multiple times during the month on training classes. Well, there weren't any because everything shut down. So we're still going to work. We were reviewing records and we did a lot of testing. And Arizona is a great test bed for something like that. How far away from a cell site could you be and connect to it? And we have very rural spots of Arizona. I talked about that competition between cell sites for the best quality signal. The denser the area, Phoenix, that competition's heavy. There's lots of signals. Your phone's seen dozens of signals, and it can determine which one's number one. But as soon as you move a little bit, it could change. Well, when you get in rural areas, really rural areas, there's only so many options. So we found a hilltop, a mountaintop, I should say, that had a cell site on it. And we found a mountaintop that was miles away that had a perfect line of sight to that mountaintop. And we had all of our equipment out there that we can use to legally measure, can this phone see the cell site? Are they communicating? We were able to execute a phone call, a text message, and stream some video with a lot of buffering at 62 miles. It is possible, but you've got to be in a very remote area where there's no competition for it was the only quality signal. It was only one answer. We bumped out to the next mountaintop, and it was approximately about 80, 81 miles out. The device could see the cell site because cell sites typically push like 10 watts worth of power. The more watts power you push, the further you can go. Phones only send there's typically 2 wattage levels. 0.3 watts, it's very low. At best, 3 watts. So 0.3 up to 3, that's very low wattage. So the problem at 80 miles is we couldn't complete any connections. The phone could see the cell site because it's higher wattage, but nothing can get from the cell site back to the phone. So those are extremes. In the right area, Idaho, New Mexico, Colorado, you could hit 60 miles out and complete a phone call. But we've mapped a cell site over at ASU where the handoff area is less than 300 meters. That's it. That's its coverage area because it's a competitive nature. So that was a very long-winded answer, but there's no easy answer. Every environment is different. LA is heavy urban, New York City is heavy urban, but they don't function even remotely the same because one's spread out and one's built up. Even a heavy urban environment in 2 different parts of the United States is going to be different.
We're getting close on our afternoon break. You okay to go, just go a little bit more, or we can stop now? Okay. Jury doing okay? All right, we're going to take our break shortly. All right. Had you been involved with the writing of the ZET software?
So the programming language, no. If you've heard my background, I'm a bit of a knuckle dragger. I'm an operator. And I didn't have the slightest idea how to programming for software. As far as the utility nature of what the buttons that I need to see patterns, I had influence on, I needed to do this. So vision, yes, but programming, no.
What time was sunset on 1/21/2020? And also dusk/twilight?
I have no idea. I understand the question, but I don't know.
All right. We are going to, it's 3:03. Council, I think it's a good time to take our break. Well, let me just confirm. Do any jurors have any other questions of this witness? Okay. So there's no other questions for this witness from the jury. I don't see any indication there is. So,
Judge, we were just discussing, we have some follow-up, but if the court wants to take a break right now, that's fine too.
well, come on up for a moment. All right, looking out for Dahlia, looking out for the jury and everyone else. We're going to go ahead and take our afternoon recess. So we're going to be in recess 15 minutes. And remember the admonition. Please keep an open mind. Do not formulate a position. Keep an open mind about the case. Please don't form any opinions about the case. Please do not talk to anyone about the case. And do not let anyone talk to you about the case. That includes each other. All right, we're going to stand in recess 15 minutes. It's 3:05 right now. Please be seated. The record will reflect that the jury's been excused for the afternoon recess. With Dahlia's indulgence, I'd rather do it now while it's still fresh in my memory. I just want to make a record that we did a sidebar and there was agreement by counsel for both parties, so I didn't call Dahlia in, but I do want to make a record that on question, what the court's marked as jury question 64, there's 4 separate questions. Counsel for both parties objected to what was marked as questions 1 and 3 being asked, and so the court did not ask those questions. And then all of the questions on what has been marked jury question 65 were objected to by counsel for both parties, so the court did not ask those questions. And that is also true with question 66. Both attorneys for both parties objected to the question that's been marked as juror question 66, so it was not asked. All right, we stand in recess. You don't have to stick around for these. Take your break. Oh, you have to wait, don't you?